So Halo Campaign Evolved released this week. Do you think Microsoft has learned anything at this point?
How about no?
Hello everyone, Jonathan here with this week's gaming news wrap up. I thank you for tuning back in for another video. So we got a few things to talk about in addition to the cover story. There have been a couple other games that released this week. They've gotten off to a rocky start. The EA sale to the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund has been finalized. I'll talk briefly about what I think that means. Roblox is continuing to struggle to protect their littlest players and a couple other things. As always, every story I talk about is time-stamped in the description box down below, so feel free to scroll down there and jump ahead to a story you're interested in. Now, before I get to all the rest of that, we got to talk about Halo Campaign Evolved and where this is going. And newsflash, it ain't going anywhere good, so let's get into it. Okay, I'm going to start with this Dual Shockers article, mostly because it was the first one I found that had these suggested sales numbers, and they say Halo Studios hit by layoffs after Campaign Evolved launch. About a week after Halo Campaign Evolved's public launch, multiple employees have begun announcing they've been laid off from Xbox Game Studios developer Halo Studios. This comes after a July Alinea Analytics report that says that Campaign Evolved only sold 900,000 copies on the Xbox Series platforms, 425,000 copies on PlayStation, and about 200,000 on Steam, which puts them between 1.5 and 1.6 million. This was a July report that ended supposedly on July 31st. We've had another week of August. I'm guessing they're still in that 1.5 to 2 million copies sold range, maybe a little over 2 million. Okay, we'll come back to that. And they say reviews for Halo Campaign Evolved have been notably mixed across all platforms, which is true. We'll go over here and look at Steam. And you see, if you can't read that, it says 62% of reviews are positive with a mixed rating. You look at the negative reviews, and while a lot of people praise the game's visuals and say that the gunplay is as good as ever, people are complaining about audio problems, story problems, and more notably, lack of competitive multiplayer. I go over to PlayStation, and it's at 3.85 out of 5 stars, which is kind of low for a PlayStation Store offering for a major franchise. And again, the reviews, a lot of people complaining about lack of competitive multiplayer, PvP multiplayer. There are no reviews on the Xbox Store, but looks like less than 3.5 out of 5 stars right here. So it's not being rated all that well. Okay, and they come down here and they talk about back in this Dual Shockers article about people on LinkedIn, several former employees have begun posting they were laid off. Okay. And then it says recently it was revealed that Halo's next multiplayer project was canceled due to Campaign Evolved facing a troubled development, and the new rumors that they're working on a Halo 2 or 3 remake. According to Rebs Gaming, I'm unfamiliar with who they are, Halo Studios reportedly mismanaged the development of Combat Evolved, as it was originally primarily developed by external developers Abstraction and Virtuous under a strict, aggressive timeline. Virtuous, if you may remember, did the lion's share of the work on the Oblivion remaster for Bethesda last year. Well, the last couple of years, released last year. Okay, only for Halo Studios to end their contract, the development studios, Abstraction and Virtuous, to end their contract with them midway through the game's development, causing them to have to hastily redo the developers' work before launch. And so there's a lot up in the air of what's going on right now. So what does this all mean? I think it means Halo Studios is actually in real trouble. And let me explain. I'm going to break this into two parts. First, I want to talk about what it means for Halo and then for the wider Xbox ecosystem. So starting with Halo Studios. Okay, they released this game, and if we believe the Alinea Analytics, I'm just going to round up and say we're in the vicinity of 2 million copies sold. If it was $50 for the base version, $70 for the ultra version, I'm just going to assume that about half the people brought that and choose a median price of $60 per unit moved. Times 2 million copies is 120 million minus the storefront fees they paid to PlayStation and to Steam. You're probably talking they came into the just under 100 million in total profit. I've seen estimates that any range from anywhere from $100 to $150 million for this game in terms of development and marketing. And I'm going to guess those are probably about right. It's a AAA game. None of them are done on the cheap anymore, especially since this one's been in development for a while. So they are probably not quite to recouping their investment cost in this so far. It really determines on what kind of sales trail it's going to have into the future. And I'm not sure it's going to have much of one, to be honest with you. The big thing is that right now, it's available on Xbox as a Games Pass day one. So I think the people that wanted to buy it, the majority of them have bought it. It was tried by about 1% of the PlayStation audience. Again, I think the people that wanted it probably have bought it. And anybody that's looking at this and going, anybody that's thinking, well, I'll wait until I hear what everybody else is having to say, and the reception's been really mixed, I don't think it's going to entice a lot of people. This is especially true on Steam, where just a recent report, a survey, showed that about 50% of Steam users are reluctant to buy a game. It negatively impacts their decision to buy a game if the game is rated mostly positive or mixed, which means that, I mean, you cut off half of that, the PC user base almost right away with that, because this game is mixed, and I don't see it crawling up anytime soon. The only thing I can think that might get some traction for Halo Studios with this is if they scramble to implement a competitive multiplayer, a PvP version to add to this. But as far as I know, they have no plans to do so. In fact, they're already looking at their next game. They're already talking about moving on to what will probably be a Halo 2 remake. Now, this is where I'll start talking kind of about the wider strategy of this. And again, I'm going to break this into two parts. How is Xbox going to deal with this with Halo Studios? Given what we've seen so far come from their CEO, Asha Sharma, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of patience for a studio that's not producing, that's still continuing to be a money drag. The Halo IP is probably Xbox's signature IP in terms of what drives people to buy consoles, or did in the past. And I don't know how much longer they're going to be allowed kind of to make their own decisions. Like what we saw happen to Bethesda with Fallout, and Fallout title being shunted over to Obsidian. Kind of, they were directed top down that this was going to happen. And I wonder if we're going to start seeing some of that with Halo Studios, and you're not going to start seeing some changes in leadership, and you may start seeing more layoffs, frankly, because of this. I think that Xbox is not going to have a whole lot of patience for this, at least based on previous indicators. So there's going to be more problems coming for Halo Studios. Will they have time to put out another game without basically getting the boot on their neck? To be determined. Now, the other half of this is, how is this reflecting on Xbox? I said in a short earlier this week that some of the things that were going on with Xbox, I'm not going to necessarily blame on Sharma. A lot of these things that were happening were still things that were in motion before she took over. That excuse, though, has an expiration date. She's only going to be able to deal with that for so long before her higher-up bosses start applying the same pressure to her as she's applying to the studios beneath. Now, like I said, I've reported on this before. Some cynics have said that this is Microsoft's way of trying to sunset Xbox or divest themselves of this brand. And that's a possibility that could happen, or they could sell it off. Although at this point, who would buy it? But I think that she is going to start to come under mounting pressure as well if things aren't performing. We talked about the fact recently that, say, Fable is not looking too good. It's uncomfortably over budget. And that game releases in February. It's going to have to sell millions of copies to break even. And, I hope that people who get, I had somebody comment, says, I'll be one of the millions that buy it. And I said, okay, great. I hope it lives up to your hype. They've got the Gears of War as E-Day. It's coming out in October. It's apparently hundreds of millions of dollars into its production budget. And, that's going to be an Xbox PC exclusive. So we'll see what happens there. But she is going to have a limited time frame to start getting things moving in the right direction. I think Xbox has made some winning decisions, depending on how they handle it, such as announcing that they're going to start trying to move more Xbox 360 games to PC. I think that's a great move if they do it, and do it without a whole lot of mess, which of course is, a big caveat. But none of that changes the fact that they have to produce good games, and they have to start doing it quickly. So this is kind of where Halo Campaign Evolved is sitting. And, if there's anything I can tell Xbox, It's don't feel bad, because you are certainly in good company when it comes to misery in this industry, as we're going to talk about next. All right, we got a few other stories to touch on, and the next one is this Video Games Chronicle article from Wednesday the 5th. EA could be set for mass layoffs as it aims to cut costs following the Saudi acquisition. We reported on this months ago that the Saudi private investment fund, along with a couple others, had been trying to take Electronic Arts, buy it and take it private, so there was no stock involved. That was challenged. It had to go through all the Federal Trade Commission stuff, but it has cleared. It is going to happen now. And this article, if you're interested, I'll link it below, because it goes into the exact detailing of how this happens. But the upshot of it is the Saudis had to take on an enormous amount of debt to make this happen. And they are going to be interested in cutting pretty much every part of this company that isn't profitable, that isn't contributing directly to profitability, because they've got a huge debt they're going to have to pay off. Based on the numbers given, I would estimate that they're going to look to cut about 1,500 to 2,000 people from EA. And again, if you're curious about how I arrived at that, let me know. I'll post it in the comments. They're going to be cutting a lot of people because they're looking at reducing overhead. EA Sports, that's going to continue to do well. It probably makes up 70% of EA's revenue every year, and the Saudis will lean heavily into that. The new owners will, because that's the profitable part, but things that aren't profitable are going to go. And as this article from Thursday the 6th shows, EA is looking to sell Bioware and other IPs following Saudi takeover, claims Insider. This is on the website Tech for Gamers. And they say they could sell Bioware and some other IPs under its care. There will be mass layoffs. The company previously tried to sell Bioware in 2025, but talks eventually fell through. Okay, and it says how the company has announced it will cut another $700 million in costs, leading to layoffs. And here's the actual post. They're going to try and cut hundreds of millions. Everybody expects large-scale layoffs. Moreover, EA will look to auction off some of its IPs. Regardless, the sale of Bioware alongside its tentpole games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age is now highly likely. According to reports from last October, EA attempted to offload Bioware after the failure of Dragon Age The Veilguard, and the talks fell through. The gaming giant decided to greenlight Mass Effect 5, which is currently in production. At least it is for right now. Remains to be seen if this doesn't get axed. People have said, well, they're going to sell Bioware, and my first thought was, to whom? Xbox isn't going to buy it. They're cutting down. They're trying to cut costs. Ubisoft is in no position to buy it. Obviously, EA isn't going to do it. I mean, does PlayStation want to take this on? I doubt it. I don't think BioWare is going to be able to do what, say, Compulsion Games did and try and make themselves spin themselves back into their own ownership. I don't think there's any funding for that. I guess Take-Two could buy them. That's a possibility, but realistically, I think the impact of the gamer. I guess I should just cut to the chase. The impact of the gamer is there's a very real chance that Mass Effect 5 is going to get shelved, outright canceled, or just delayed. And I don't know if we'll ever see another Dragon Age game at this point. That's just kind of where we are. So we're going to have to wait and see how this unfolds. But yeah, expect more shakeups at EA, and BioWare is in real danger of, frankly, disintegrating. Well, I didn't see this coming. I expected this game to do better. This Game Rant article from Wednesday the 5th, Beast of Reincarnation developer Game Freak planning major improvements after mixed reviews. If you're unfamiliar with Game Freak, they're the Nintendo studio that does a lot of Pokemon games. This was their foray into something different, an action RPG that takes inspiration from Souls-likes. And they say Game Freak's already planning a series of post-launch improvements to Beast of Reincarnation after its new action RPG received mixed reviews from critics and players alike. Okay, and that talks about the game there a little bit. In a statement shared on Twitter, Beast of Reincarnation developer Game Freak thanked players and said it was taking their feedback to heart. The game's first planned patch includes camera adjustments, larger text, pacing, unspecified bug fixes, plans to make the 60 FPS performance mode the default option on consoles. Okay, and so on. However, the studio does warn the patch's contents remain subject to change. Narrative pacing will undergo further adjustments beyond this update. So they're going to be trying to change the story around. It comes down here. Beast of Reincarnation's camera issues, text readability, technical bugs, and graphical, relatively straightforward targets for an early patch, but promised narrative changes are more complicated. They've not specified how or what the scope of these fixes are going to be, whether it will be shortened cutscenes, revised dialogue, and whatever else. Now, it's good that they've responded quickly, but I am kind of surprised, like I said, to see this half-baked. It did seem to do okay on PlayStation Store. I think it had like a 4.25 out of 5 rating, which is okay for them. But I cut over here to Steam on the Steam DB, and I see that they've got a mixed review. And what do we just talk about with Halo Campaign Evolved? Mixed review will keep 50% of the players from buying it. And these are their numbers, and I'm really surprised. I expected this game to be higher. But this is a good example lesson. I've had this game on my wish list, but this is why I don't buy on day one, because I always wait and see what happens. They've seen very little, almost a flat concurrent player count over the weekend. It didn't get a weekend bump. Not a good sign. This game is probably going to bottom out under 5,000 players within a week if they don't fix it. So their first foray, Game Freak's first adventure into something else, hadn't gone so well. So this is, with Halo Campaign Evolved in the last couple of weeks, the second high-profile game that hasn't done real well. But oh wait, there is a third. I am convinced Sony can't go a full week without stepping on their own dick. This IGN article from Friday the 7th, Marvel Tokon stumbles to mixed Steam reviews as, quote, miserable PC port complaints prompt response from Arc System Works. Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls stumbled onto Steam with the mixed user reviews, and what have we just been saying, as players complained of PlayStation account requirements, anti-cheat roadblocks, and other technical issues. Okay? Then there's just a flood of negatives reviews on this page. There are no good technical excuse for shutting out Linux. 45 FPS for a fighting game is embarrassing. It says the issue related to PSN, meanwhile, is one players expected to run into. Steam noted the fighting game would be blocked in more than 100 countries back in early July, with many putting the blame on Sony's requirement for PC players to create and link a PlayStation account in order to play. Now, bear in mind, the PSN account, we're not talking about Central Africa and war-torn areas like Afghanistan exclusively. We're also talking about countries like Belize and Central America. You're talking about Bosnia, Herzegovina, Lithuania. These are the Sri Lanka near India. These are all countries with actual infrastructure. They're not, they're not places where people are running around trying to scavenge chickens and remains of animals to feed themselves. But they're blocked, so they can't play. So Sony is, cutting off how many potential customers from these things. And you go on down here and people just start complaining about it. Get this Sony PlayStation account BS out of here. Game doesn't work on Steam Deck and Linux. Okay, such a fun game. Of course, Sony has to ruin everything. The PC port is miserable. Settings don't display correctly. And on and on and on. Now, I think this is funny when I go over and look at this Game Rant article from Saturday the 8th. It says Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls is being review bombed. Brother, it is not a review bomb when the game doesn't fucking work. When it has this many problems, that's not review bomb. That's customers responding correctly to a product that is substandard. Now, here it is over on Steam, and it says 41% of the reviews, it's actually, that's in English, 42% of total reviews are negative. And you can scroll down and just look at the reviews, and it's just red, 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 red. Terrible port. One of the worst controller mapping systems I've ever seen. Likely literally unplayable online. Awesome game, but I can't recommend it in its state. This is unacceptable. A fighting game running like this and not being compatible with Linux. And just people are not happy with this. And this game at 42% is slipping dangerously close to being mostly negative. And what did we just talk about a minute ago with that chart? With Steam here. The green represents people who say mostly positive or below makes them less likely to buy. 20%. Mixed, 30%. Mostly negative, 35%. It gets into mostly negative territory, and 85% of Steam users are less likely to buy. So there you go, Sony, with your live service BS that you're trying to push. Trying to push live services so hard, and that means getting it off the PlayStation Network, and the principal area you're trying to push it, you've alienated 17 out of 20 possible purchasers because you can't get your shit straight. Unacceptable. Okay, I'm going to finish up with basically two disappointing articles from Games Radar. The first of which is from Wednesday, August 5th. Roblox values tank 72% as viral hits dry up and execs try to ditch clickbaity or kind of cash grabby type games for babies and pursue an older crowd. Now, there's a lot packed into that headline. The upshot of it is that spending in Roblox dropped quarter over quarter, and their stock tanked by about 3/4 of its value, which is obviously prompting some panic there. And they said they've been suffering in the days since the company issued its Q2 earnings report to shareholders and revealed its monetization efforts are stumbling. As of writing, the company's stock has torpedoed 75% from last year. Okay. They said, okay, we come down here. Where was it the part about? Okay, he attributes the shift to a change in Roblox's recommendation algorithm, which optimizes for long-term retention, providing more attention for highly retentive gains at the expense of near-term monetization. They say younger users in particular were less motivated to spend money this quarter. They said they're describing how Roblox will approach its shrinking pool of young benefactors, which is by moving to more and more evergreen type games that keep players around for long term. Essentially, the exact opposite. Not saying we have it, but more exact opposite of clickbaity or cash grabby types of games. So they're trying to grow with their user base rather than replace the youngsters they have there. And to me, that's part of the problem because Roblox has always made themselves out to be the game for children. And now they're trying to move away from that model. It's going to be a very, very hard image to shake. Now, one of my big criticisms of Roblox is I felt like they have never done enough to address the problem of child predators on their platform. There's a long storied history of it, and rather than really address it, they've done everything they can to wash it under the rug. Case in point, this PC Games In article, and this was posted also on Wednesday, August 5th. Chris Hansen gets banned from Roblox live on stage during an online safety talk. During an online safety panel at CrimeCon 26, Chris Hansen's account is banned from Roblox while he is demonstrating a user chat feature. If your goal is to make it look like you are doing everything you can to address the vulnerability of children on your, quote, child-friendly platform from people who wish to do them harm, it is a terrible optics move to ban what has probably been one of the foremost crusaders in the last 20 years against that exact issue. Your Roblox has an enormous optics problem, which I think is going to ultimately be their biggest impediment to this. Now, they do have to this being, when I say this being their strategy to move forward. Now, they do have the built-in fan base that is going to have grown up playing the game and may want to continue to do so later in life. Maybe. Tastes change, people change, and trends change. And I'm not sure they can do it. And honestly, I'm not sure they should be able to do it. Like I said, with their lack of accountability, the fact that they've been banned in multiple countries, they're still involved in lawsuits with multiple states over this very issue. Fuck them. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, people spending less money on this platform, that's a good thing. I'm going to close with this second article from Games Radar and just use it as a cautionary tale. And my plea to you, the viewer and the gamer, to just be a good custodian of your dollar. This is from the Wednesday the 5th. After promising less invasive microtransactions, RuneScape dev Jagex rolls out one-time use microtransactions, then immediately backpedals. Essentially, when you read down here, they were doing house decoration bundles. They contain a set number of furniture items rather than cosmetics. Each bundle can be purchased multiple times. In other words, they're disposable. One of these bundles would cost $12 worth of rune coins for items like balloons. Players, unsurprisingly, weren't happy. No shit. Okay? Since this decoration push followed a substantial price hike for RuneScape subscriptions, not to mention Jagex's recent pledge to clean up the game and make microtransactions less invasive. A new egregious breed of microtransactions didn't exactly fit that message. Move over horse armor, a new microtransaction has hit RuneScape one-time use player decorations. And Jagex returned on August 4th to say it's changed his mind. We insist there's a better way to offer up these items. They didn't change their minds. They got scared from the feedback and the blowback they were getting. Be a good custodian of your own dollar. Be your own best advocate, because these companies, they do not care about you and they will bleed you dry if you let them. So as always, stay awake and stay conscious and just be careful out there. All right, y'all, I think that's enough bad news for 1 week, so I'm going to leave this video here. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please consider leaving a like on the video. Drop a comment down below. If you got a question or a comment about anything we discussed here, if you think I got a story wrong, let me know. I'd love to talk about it. I do read all comments, and I try to answer as many of them as possible. Hit that bell so you're notified the next time a weekly news video gets posted. And if you think I've earned your subscription, I thank you in advance for that. I would really love to have it. I'd love to know people are getting some value out of what I'm doing here. I apologize for not having a video last week. I was I'm on the planning committee for our local book festival here, and that was last Saturday. So I was pretty wiped out and just didn't have the gumption to do a video. Fortunately, it's been a relatively slow news after all the PlayStation and Xbox shenanigans a couple weeks ago. Anyway, we're going to do this again next week, so I look forward to seeing you then. Till then, thanks for tuning in. You all go out there, live your best lives, and you all stay gaming.